My name is Anthony Kapkin. I'm the editor publisher of Electrical Business Magazine and your host for this afternoon. I am broadcasting from land within the traditional and treaty territory of the Michisage and Chippewa Anishinaabe and the signatories of the William Treaties. I and my colleagues, Doug Picklick from HPAC Magazine and Adam Friel of Onsite Magazine, are really excited about the conversations we'll be hearing today from some truly inspiring industry leaders and experts. Their insights and diverse experiences will show how inclusivity propels innovation, fosters growth, and positions your organization as an employer of choice. All good things for business sustainability and resiliency, especially in the face of impending labor shortages. So I hope you brought your notepads and sharpened your pencils. Of course, conversations like this on this scale cannot occur without the help of some special partners, our fantastic sponsors. Our platinum sponsor, Procore Technologies, is committed to advancing the construction industry. Its connected global construction platform unites all stakeholders on a project with unlimited access to support and a business model designed for the construction industry. Our gold sponsor, Jacques Cartier and Champlain Bridge Incorporated, ensures a safe drive by managing, maintaining, and repairing important infrastructure for Greater Montreal. All of its employees have adopted a values and ethics code and behaviors for a safe and productive work environment. Our bronze sponsor, EMCO Corporation, is one of Canada's largest integrated distributors, specializing in plumbing, HVAC-R, waterworks, and industrial products, with an expansive network of over 275 distribution warehouses and showrooms. Bronze sponsor Electricity Human Resources Canada, EHRC, is the most trusted source of human resources insight, programs, and tools for the Canadian electricity industry. Thank you all, and please take some time to check out their sponsor profile pages on the Pursuing DEI agenda page. Now we're just a few seconds from starting, I promise, just some quick housekeeping notes. You, the audience, are in listen-only mode. The chat is disabled. This event is being recorded and will be available for viewing later. Our sessions are not structured for a formal Q&A period. That said, feel free to type a question into Zoom's Q&A panel, and our panelists may address your question as part of their conversations. We will have one break, 10 minutes long, after session 1, before sessions 2 and 3. Okay, you've heard my voice long enough. Time to bring out our keynote speaker, Rubina Duarte, Vice President, Global Diversity and Inclusion with Procore Technologies, who will speak about recognizing and navigating unconscious bias during the hiring process. Please take it away, Rubina.
Thanks, Anthony. I love your voice. It's like such a radio voice. Hi, everyone, and I'll kind of extend a welcome again. I want to thanks to having me here today to talk to you a little bit about unconscious bias. I'm really excited to be here having this conversation. And I think you're going to be learning quite a lot. As Anthony said, there are some amazing experts in the industry who are going to be joining and sharing more on panels for the rest of the day. So as I said, today we're talking about unconscious bias. We are going to broaden it a bit more outside of only hiring. But let's just kind of like start to talk about, how do we all feel when we kind of experience a little bit of unconscious bias ourselves? So what I know is when I enter every room, I enter as a brown woman. That's who I am. It's what people see first. Sometimes I can feel it. And I feel it even more when I wear a hijab as a brown Muslim woman. I feel it when I travel. I feel it walking into stores. And I know it's real. I know it's not in my head. We can label it as different isms or, is it racism? Is it sexism? Is it some type of phobia? But it's a bias that's there that people have of what I look like or what I might be wearing based on some of the experiences that they may have had with someone who looks like me. And that is very, very real. It's real to the person, but it's also real to a person like me who sits back and goes, okay, this doesn't feel that great. And when we ignore some of those biases when they exist, it really becomes detrimental to people and to cultures. And I want you all just to kind of like start thinking about yourselves when you are in situations. How have you kind of felt, wow, that person is already making a stereotype about me or generalization just based on how I look? Those are the biases that exist that people may experience from you. I know that everyone may have experienced it in some way or the other. And the other side of it is you probably have shown up with some biases. I have for sure, because all of us have it. And we'll talk a little bit more later about how do those biases actually creep into our brain. Now, working at Procore, which is a construction software company, you may be asking yourself, how does a company like Procore that focuses on the construction industry really know anything about inclusion and specifically unconscious bias? Which is a great question. What I'll share with you is Procore is a people-first company. So what that means is we really value hiring the right people for the right roles and kind of uncovering any rock that might be in the way from preventing us to do so, including unconscious bias. And so in a company that's on a mission to really improve the lives of everyone in construction, we're really committed to ensuring that we mitigate biases through all of our processes. We're not perfect. We still have work to do. But I'm hoping that today, in the short time I have with you, is to share with you maybe some ideas on what you can think about when you go back into your workplace, organization, job site tomorrow, or maybe reaffirm what you may already know. So an area first to start off with is thinking just about your values in the company. Now, bear with me as I pop up some slides. And I promise you, this is not going to be slide overload today. But I also thought you don't just want to see me talking. So I'm going to share with you a couple of things. All right. So the one thing that is really important in companies is your values. So these could be written values or unwritten values. When I talk about, people-centric and a huge focus of Procore, these are three simple values: ownership, openness, and optimism that we focus on. Nowhere in the values do you see the word inclusion. You don't see the word bias, but within each of those, we ensure that we're creating this culture where people do want to belong. We're creating a culture where leaders demonstrate inclusive behaviors. And so what I would ask you to do is think about what does those values, what does the culture of your organization resonate with employees, resonate with candidates? What does that look like? And when somebody looks towards your organization, do they look towards it and go, wow, that sounds like a place where I can be open? That sounds like a place where I'm going to be empowered. That sounds like a place where leaders may not, micromanage me all the time. And it's a place I'd want to be. And so those are things I would definitely say to think about. As Anthony mentioned, talking about the labor shortage that we have in the industry, when we think about D&I, aside from the very kind of tangible short and long-term impacts of valuing D&I, we also know that there is a critical impact to our hiring and to the labor shortage. In 2023, so last year, it was reported that Canadian construction companies missed out, I believe it was like $9.6 billion in revenue opportunities because of the labor shortage. And while there already are tens of thousands of construction jobs to fill across the country, it's estimated that as many as 300,000 Canadian construction workers will retire in the next 10 years. For those of you whose companies focus, further into other areas, for example, within the US, it's estimated that within the next 8 years, 40% of that labor workforce will be retiring from the construction industry. So if you think about this huge amount of job openings that we have, and then the huge amount that's retiring, we have to think about how do we kind of entice this next generation to actually want to join the industry. Now, when you think about Gen Zs, and I have a couple at home, I know for them, they look to companies in terms of what is that culture going to be like? How am I going to feel when I'm there? What do they practice, right? In other words, they think about inclusion. And so, making sure that you can actually talk about what that culture is and how people may feel is going to be really, really important for you to bring in that next generation into the industry. Particularly as we know, if you think about high schools, they're not talking about construction as an industry to go into, right? I've had the conversation with my 16-year-old recently, and it's never brought up in any of their career conversations. So the more we start talking about our industry, how it provides opportunities, how you could feel, what the culture's like, we're hopefully going to be able to address some of these labor shortages. Okay, so now I got to try and figure out how to go to the next slide. Okay, so I thought to start us off, I know that you just joined this, but we're going to do a quick exercise. Not a physical exercise, but kind of a mental one. So what I'm going to ask you all to do is close your eyes, take a deep breath, and imagine a couple of things. So imagine you're on a way to catch a flight. You run through the airport, you make it through security, you run down the jetway, and you just about make it on the plane as they close the door behind you. The pilot steps out of the cockpit, says hello to you. Get to your destination, go to a local restaurant, and you have one of the best meals you've ever had. The next table, there's a couple celebrating their anniversary. The next morning, you go to the biggest technology conference, and the CEO of this year's hottest startup just took the stage. Now, you should have a solid picture of all of that, so open your eyes. Have some questions for you to think about in that mental image. Was the pilot Black? Was the married couple two men? Did the tech CEO on stage look like me? Now, it's absolutely okay if one or all of your answers were no. The brain actually creates images of what is familiar to you, and it's kind of less of a fan of what's not familiar. So the things I mentioned are less familiar, as much as you're open to all of these. So I know you're open to me being, the CEO of the biggest tech startup, but your brain is reacting in milliseconds. And we need that. We need as a species, we need to survive, right? That instinct that we have to react, we need that. So how bias shows up is your brain is instinctively reacting to what it knows unconsciously, right? From experiences you've had. It could be how you were brought up. It could be something that you've experienced about a certain group or person. And that's how your brain reacts. That's how bias is showing up. Now, there's tons of science around us, which I am not going to get into, but if you are somebody who loves kind of reading more about the science and the brain and all of this, there's tons of stuff you can probably Google and research and find out about. So simple definition to kind of have on hand around unconscious bias then, just based on what I shared with you, it really refers to assumptions, stereotypes, and reactions about a person or group of people that are formed by our experiences, our upbringing, and societal influences. So again, it's not about, calling somebody out as, oh, you have these biases, you're clearly sexist or you're clearly racist. It's literally something that is part of experiences you have. And the main thing with unconscious bias is being self-aware. So I hope the definition helps you slightly, and that example, right, that visual example, which I actually, there's a few of those examples. Like if you ever wanted to try that with somebody else, this was from a woman named Valerie, who's online, and she kind of posted the pilot one, which I thought was really interesting. So you can work through a few of those even with your own teams if you're trying to talk through unconscious bias. So there definitely are different types of unconscious bias. These are just a few, and I'll kind of talk you through what some of these are, just so that they kind of like resonate with you, or you're familiar with the examples I'll provide. as I said to you, like these different types of biases we all have. I could probably give you examples of how I've shown up with this bias in many different ways, right? Again, it's the self-awareness and catching ourselves as to, wow, am I doing that? And how do I maybe need to shift my thinking? So affinity bias, this is where individuals tend to favor or give preferential treatment to others who are similar to them. So if you think about it, it could be factors such as race, gender, ethnicity, age, background, the university you went to, the college you went to, where you've previously worked. And it's something unconsciously we do where you gravitate towards certain people, right? And that are similar to you, have same hobbies. So in a work environment, it could be, for example, a supervisor who spends more time connecting with one of their team members who they have that affinity to, who they have that we belong to the same sports club, or we play the same sports, or our kids are the same age, and you talk about parenting a lot, right? That affinity bias, how that could impact the rest of the team, the rest of the individuals around you, where you may not have that many familiarities, right? So just being aware of, am I actually showing up in a way that's engaging with certain people more than others? It's a type of bias. Halo effect bias, easy way to think about this is like an image of a halo, right? So a halo casts like a positive sort of effect on everyone. It's this like halo above your head. So if you think about a halo effect, it's when you have a positive impression of somebody, and then regardless of any other traits the person has, you only maintain that positive image. So what that can do, it can impact you actually being able to objectively provide feedback to a person, have a conversation that might be a little bit more constructive, because you'll see everything in that person as very positive. The opposite being the horn effect, which I think, sometimes maybe shows up a bit more, is where you have a negative expression of someone, and then those kind of traits impact everything you're thinking about, regardless of, additional impressions. This happens sometimes with bias related to certain groups of people. It could be if you have somebody that was working in one area of a job site and now moved to another, and you hear from someone, oh, this person, used to, for example, I tell you that they were very lazy, or they didn't clean up after what they did on the job site. And you take that and you use that as, okay, that's just how this person is. And you don't give them the benefit of the doubt in terms of that behavior change. So what I would say to you with halo and horn effect bias, where you either have this very positive image or negative of a person or a group, again, step back and say to yourself, why am I thinking this way? Try to broaden your mindset. So having those growth mindsets where you're actually questioning yourself as to, do I need to pause, reflect, and kind of start questioning things differently? Have I given somebody the benefit of the doubt? Am I showing up with these stereotypes, right? And then shifting your behavior. Confirmation bias is exactly what it is. It's confirming. So you actually seek out or want to kind of recall information that confirms your belief. So what that would mean is, if you truly believe that a certain group of people or an individual at work behaves a certain way, you're going to make sure you're talking to other peers who've had a similar experience with that individual. Think about even like in the political vortex that we live in. If you truly believe in a specific candidate, you're going to seek out information that confirms what you're believing in. So again, right, are you just seeking out input and seeking out information that's confirming what you're believing in? Or are you actually broadening what you're thinking to include other perspectives as well? So just again, I'm hoping you're kind of getting that this is all about the self-aware piece. Conformity bias. So this is an interesting one, because this is more where in certain environments, individuals kind of adjust their behavior or their attitudes or their beliefs so that they fit in with the dominant group, even if they personally disagree with that. So this way of conformance could be a desire to fit in, to avoid social rejection, to seek approval from others. And when you think about an environment where this may exist, if you have a culture or a work environment or a situation where someone's doing this, they probably are doing it because they don't feel that they can actually be themselves. They don't feel they can show up as themselves. And that's going to impact your retention. I had a leader once who said to me, if you're ever in an environment where you're feeling you're having to change who you are to fit in, then it's probably time for you to leave where you are, because you shouldn't be changing who you are. Now, unfortunately, many people can just up and leave their job. And so this is one I would say, to be really aware of the surroundings around you. Are you seeing that you have groupthink? Are you actually allowing in diversity of perspectives and thoughts? And it could be anything. It could be something strategic. It could be something around a building site. It could be anything. Are you allowing those perspectives? And is it because by doing that, you're actually just going to promote more innovation? So those are the biases that kind of could exist in different environments as well. Okay, and then the availability bias, last one, easy to remember what's available in front of you. So this is where you really are making judgments and decisions based on information that's readily available to you, right? So you're relying on just like quick examples that you found, recognizing what's right in front of you. And obviously we want to make sure that you're looking broader than just what's in front of you to have more informed decisions. You're actively seeking out different sources of information. Think about this even in the context of if you're in an environment where some people are on site, some people are not on site, or you have, if you're leading a team or something and you have people at different locations, do you tend to actually bring in individuals into new projects, et cetera, who sit literally in the site that you're at and not somebody else? And so this bias often shows up when there are instances of this return from home. I've had a lot of conversations with leaders when we kind of have like, okay, we're going to be, people are returning from home and some people are not. How does this availability bias show up? So these are kind of 6. There's many more biases that exist, but sharing these with you as kind of that check mark for yourself in terms of, are you seeing it? Are you experiencing it? Or are you showing up in that way? And do you need to pause and make sure that you're kind of like thinking through, hey, should this change in some way yourself and in the way you're experiencing it? Okay. All right. So how does this show up? This is just 4 examples of how we may see unconscious bias showing up. There are many more, but I'm going to kind of focus on a few for today. And you're going to be hearing about so much more in terms of inclusion from different panelists. And I think that's going to allow you also to connect the dots on some of this. So we'll start with hiring. So many studies have shown that applicants with actually almost similar resumes and experience are 50% more likely to be contacted if they had a white sounding name versus somebody of an ethnicity or a Black sounding name. And that's just like that is just research is actually showing us the biases that exist in looking at a resume. More and more, we know that, there are that some recruiters actually use ahead of even reviewing the interviews with additional people, like actually removing where the person went to school, right? Because sometimes that actually has an impact in terms of how people think from a socioeconomic status, what that might be. I would think, for those of you who are hiring in Toronto, we are probably one of the most ethnic and racially diverse cities. And so when you are seeing, people with backgrounds, maybe they're immigrants coming from different countries, is that impacting how you're considering the person, right? So all of those different pieces are part of what happens with biases in hiring. Now, you could be out, okay, so what do you do to prevent that? Definitely think about who's reviewing the resumes coming in or who's reviewing the number of applicants you have. Are those individuals, and I'm not saying that you have to always have a diverse recruiting team, but are the recruiters familiar with hiring bias? That's one thing, right? Actually enabling your recruiters to identify, hold on, how am I looking at this resume? Am I looking at it based on like their experience, they can do the role, or am I letting other factors creep in? And then once the individual comes in for an interview, actually also thinking about, what does that interview panel look like as well? Going to promotions, so women are evaluated on personality and attitudes 1.5 times more than men. That's a fact. So in a promotion conversation, this may show up like her technical skills are great, but she doesn't seem to be very excited about the work. So the view on promotions, again, is how in your areas, if you're leading something, if you are driving conversations, are you very objectively assessing promotions? And the same thing I would say with the kind of pay piece at the end, right? Are you reviewing constantly what that looks like? And maybe it's a question you ask, of your teams that are leading this work in your companies. Do they do some type of equity analysis, right? That actually says, hey, do we have more people of a certain gender who are showing up as high for promotions or not, or showing up high for underperformance? And what that could indicate is maybe your leaders, your people leaders in the company need some help with thinking through more inclusive behaviors. On the retention side, there's an organization called Coquel who I absolutely love. They do very much objective research. They did some research around just retention and bias and found out that 48% of employees have looked for another job while they were in their current role when they have actually perceived bias at work. So if you think about the examples I went through earlier, how bias may be showing up, you could have almost half of your team, half of your group looking for other jobs if that culture and environment is in a way showing up that they don't feel they can be themselves, that they feel that they're being treated differently, that they're experiencing bias. And with the labor shortage, we definitely want to make sure that that's not happening. So keeping a check on that environment around you can help with ensuring that your retention rate is higher and your attrition is lower. So a self-reflection for yourself, again, think about, have you ever misjudged or underestimated someone before getting to know them? Yes, I know I absolutely have. This could be personally or professionally. Think about even if you're like involved in like your kids' school, like PTA, and you show up there and you have like, judgment about certain people who are their parents. It could be anywhere where you actually are underestimating somebody. Did their identity, appearance, or background really contribute to your assumptions about them? Think back to that definition, right? About stereotyping, about the way maybe you were brought up, about what were you experiencing around you and why those biases may exist. And then when you actually did realize that, did you learn something about yourself that realized you have misjudged that person and that you can shift? So those are just some things that I would say to you, definitely think about. And what I'll leave you with today, because I think I'm almost at time, is quick 4 things, right? So hopefully you gain something from some of the examples I shared. I know this is recorded, so you'll be able to look at it again and get this deck. You can also reach out to me if you want to talk about any of this more specifically, but be self-aware. Reflect on what your own biases are, right? Like I said, we all have them. It's not a negative thing if you have them, just being aware of what they are and how they're showing up. If you actually Google like free unconscious bias tests, there's a few you can actually do online and take a look at them. The other part is support all employees. And what I mean by that is if you're in a team or you're leading a team or you work with a group, or even like if you're in a sports league and you're kind of doing, you're coaching something, make a list of everyone that you're engaging in that group. Do you actually engage with them in a similar way? Are you showing up differently for certain individuals, right? So kind of keep a check on what does that look like and what could the other person's experience, how could they be feeling? Demonstrating inclusive behaviors, which I know some of the panelists are going to talk about, but just leaning into like asking questions, being curious, being open, think about that growth mindset all the time. Takes a little bit more time, but I'm telling you, it definitely helps to think about those inclusive practices. I try and put aside at least an hour a week. Hopefully I could do more, but I can't. To really go through more practices of like, how am I showing up? How am I reflecting? What does that look like? And then systemic biases, right? So if you're seeing something that doesn't entirely feel like it's equitable or fair, is there a way for you to bring that up in a really constructive way with those that are leading those areas, and understand how that might be addressed in your organization?